we went from 2,000 page views a month to 15 million. The more the audience pulled from the business, the more we had to scale up to deliver it. And we went on the roller coaster journey, getting the sheer volume of content created to satisfy the audience, but stay on brand and stay relevant to our users. By 2020, we probably had 12, and then grew that to a global roster in about 450. I wish I'd have thought about all of the building blocks on the process more at the start to avoid issues that came up as we scaled, because you are basically building the aircraft as it's taking off.
Thank you so much for hosting me in your home and making the time amidst your very busy schedule. It sounds hectic. What should people know about you?
So I'm Hannah. I am the co-founder of a scale-up digital content publishing business for families called Kidadl. Before founding Kidadl, I was about 18 years across law, banking and finance and media. So I've had a corporate career alongside a startup founder career. I'm a mum of 3 kids and a dog, and I live with my husband and my family in North London.
Kidadl, a scale-up. I personally know that it's been a wild journey from the conversations that we've had.
Yes.
But can you talk a bit about that journey and what were some of the highs and lows, and can you give us some more details on the business? Like, how many people do you employ? Any rough revenue figures would be super interesting. Anything like that would be amazing.
Yeah, so Kidadl started life as an app designed to help you get out and make the memories that having a family was all about, by being able to book within 3 taps and discover amazing things to do with your kids based on their ages, their interests, your budget and your location. So we wanted to be a pocket companion for families to get out and make the most of the day when the kids were climbing the walls and you just wanted to find something relevant to your kids and you that you could go and do. Because as parents, we'd found firsthand that that was not an easy feat. And of course, very, very kind of naive in actually what makes an app, what makes real-time availability possible. If you don't control the inventory, you can't control the availability of it. But if you're trying to scale to something like a booking.com provision for families, you need to have a lot of inventory. So we had a kind of really multifaceted journey from the ideation phase to getting an app into the market, which was in 2018. And then we all know what happened in 2020. So we were going along nicely with a really good user base. We had an app on iOS and Android, and we were growing pretty much at a conservative to moderate pace. We were doing well, and we were selling tickets, and we were getting users referring their friends, and it was going great. And then the world shut down.
Sorry, just to interrupt quickly, what does a reasonable or moderate pace of growth look like to you?
So we got to about 150,000 users, all around London and the southeast, because our inventory was all in a specific area. And then the model works that you can either set up in other areas or you can increase the products and services within your offering. We had a very, very strong online community. We had very, very strong referral rates, and we had a really, the app that we had ideated became the app that somebody held in their hand, which again, at the time, I didn't realize was no mean feat, because a product that looks and feels seamless, it takes a lot of work to get that seamless. So we had a fantastic proposition that was working really well and doing what it said on the tin by 2020. And our revenue model was based on commission on every booking, was between 10 and 20%. So the key driver in a business like an app marketplace, if your sellers are anywhere that does activities and events for families and your buyers are the parents, the key is to have the best range of inventory at the best rate of commission that you earn. The one thing that was missing from the business model, which if I did it again, I would change, was that was our core revenue model. So if somebody books a ticket for £100, you would earn 10% of that value. You wouldn't, so the revenue passing through could be in the hundreds of thousands, but your end point of revenue would not be. So you have to get to scale for that business model to work, which would have involved 3 or 4 more rounds of financing and a few more years of plugging away at that core model if COVID hadn't happened. But COVID did happen. The week before COVID was announced, I suppose, in the UK, I was in San Francisco. We'd won an award for female founders in the UK, and the winners of this particular pitch competition from SoGal Ventures were flown out to Silicon Valley, where they participated on a world stage on a program and pitched to the Silicon Valley investors their proposition. And that was at the end of February 2020. And I remember flying out there and having this idyllic week in San Francisco and exploring all these areas I'd heard all this about, and coming back into the UK. And within less than a week, life as we know it and the actual proposition that we had pitched on that stage in America suddenly became completely untenable, because the proposition was what I told you earlier: get out, make the time together count, and make the memories with your kids by going and seeing and doing and exploring the world. And all of a sudden, at least in the UK, we were told that you couldn't go anywhere without your family being in your family unit. You had to stay at home. You could go for one walk a day, and all of the venues that we work with were closed down immediately. So it looked like, and to our industry, it happened to be the case that many startups or businesses serving this family leisure sector just closed down. Within months, we'd seen two of our main competitors go out of business, and we knew that it was a matter of time against money for how soon the business would have to close its doors if we didn't find another revenue model, because there was simply no ability to service inventory in a world where everything was shut. So we decided to immediately suspend the newsletters with things to do, and immediately stop adding new inventory to the app, which might have been ready to process from a few weeks ago. And we started thinking what would actually help parents the most at this time in their lives, what would be the most value-added thing to do. And we thought it would be giving them ideas and inspiration for things to do at home to entertain and educate their kids, or help them parent through the pandemic. Just help them parent in a world where a lot of their resources from word of mouth and from connections and from other people were completely gone. So we had no idea of a business model behind this. We had no idea of the viability of scaling this. We just thought we owe it to our audience of current users to provide value. And then if anyone else finds it valuable, fantastic. We don't know. And to cut an extremely long story short that you can drill into in any way you wish, we went from kind of about 2,000 page views a month, which means 2,000 people a month coming through the doors onto our website to download the app, to a process that took us to 15 million page views a month through iterating the proposition towards content for family edutainment and to help parenting. It sounds like an overnight success, and that took about 2 years to achieve, where what we realized is when we pivoted into the model of digital publishing with an online presence through our main real estate of a website, we realized the hunger there was from families to consume the kind of content that we'd already been kind of producing on the app, but in a blog and article format. And the more the audience pulled from the business, the more we had to scale up to deliver it. And we went on the roller coaster journey you alluded to earlier, getting the sheer volume of content created to satisfy the audience, but stay on brand and stay relevant to our users, whilst, building the aeroplane without the wings kind of thing. It was, everybody else in COVID seemed to have just already a problem with homeschooling their children. I had the dual problem of homeschooling 3 children, but also a business that had been a fine, ticking along nicely startup that was being pulled towards a frenzied, absolutely bonkers, non-stop scale up, and trying to navigate the two things with varying levels of success is how I remember the pandemic period.
So not only did you have to homeschool your own kids, but it almost felt like you had to educate millions of parents online.
Yes, and also a business, especially the way startups are conceived, it's like another child. So, you've got your real children that can't languish, and they have to be stimulated and helped. And then you've got this business that can't languish. It wasn't a time to say, we know what, Kidadl, sorry, I've got to take 6 months off. It was like demanding. So I just remember working like 20-hour days with the combination of home and business through, and actually it meant the pandemic wasn't that bad for me in terms of it was a kind of adrenaline rush.
Definitely weren't bored, were you?
I wasn't bored. I was never I was in a kind of alternative reality, but one that was very challenging intellectually, even though physically it was quite limited.
And so how many people did you have in 2020 when everything shut down? You had to do this pivot. And then how many people do you have now?
2018, it was kind of us plus one or two others, one of them who's still with us today. And by 2020, we probably had 12, and then grew that to a global roster, including a huge contractor base to iterate up and down, about 450. Yeah.
That's a serious scale up of people operations. So can you talk to any lessons you've taken from 12 to 450 people?
I think a key lesson is process, which is, one of their 7 habits of highly effective people begin with the end in mind, which is whether you're hiring 10, 100 or 1,000, the more your process is embedded in how you do that, the more scalable and repeatable it is. And the more you start to figure out what could be emerging from what you're doing, because I think a lot of hindsight's a wonderful thing. And I think a lot of the time we didn't realize how much demand would come out of the business. So we lowballed it. We didn't design it for 450. We might have designed it for 40, right? But I'm saying with hindsight, I wish I'd have thought about all of the building blocks on the process more at the start to avoid issues that came up as we scaled, because you are basically building the aircraft as it's taking off. And therefore things fall off, things break, things don't go past a certain point. A classic thing would be, there's no sense of which you could have that many people without a robust management layer. But often you're building the people in before you build the management layer in, which means you're then having to embed people retrospectively, but give them management KPIs in a team that's grown a different way. So there's all these teething problems if you don't didn't even know what organizational design was. It wasn't part of my repertoire in law and banking or M&A. Oh yes, let's do some org design. But it's these kind of things that now I could go into a company and confidently design the org and confidently work through the process, because I've got the battle wounds from having done it the other way around, which is where the demand pulls out. It's not like a management consultant said, you could get to this size if you tried. It was more the demand pulled the scale of the business. So process, being able to understand the layer of supervision that a unit, or a team could deliver, and what would enable that unit to thrive, rather than, how to survive. A lot of that you learn the hard way when you're scaling faster than you can manage because of the market demand for your product.
I'd love to go into a bit more detail on which processes have made the biggest impact. So let's say someone is at the 15, 30 person mark and they're thinking, okay, I want to lay the foundations. If we do hit this hockey stick growth, what would you be doing in that situation?
So it depends what kind of how you process information. But I've learned through this period, through being a founder and scaling a business, is that for me, no amount of spreadsheets is too many spreadsheets. If I can model it, I can understand the levers that go into it, and I can understand the efficiencies that I can achieve from it. If it's through a conversation or a pictorial diagram, it doesn't work for me. I need to be able to see it in a model. So and I'm happy to spend time with anyone who wants sessions on operational models, because when you build an operational model, you can start to see where the bottlenecks are, where the opportunity for cost savings and efficiencies are, and where the opportunity to look at resourcing and leverage it differently is. If you don't model it out, and if you don't realize the links between, if I have 2 of this, I need 10 of that, then it comes back to bite you. So what I ended up building is a ridiculous level of detail for operational models and iterating the models as real life changed, because then I could understand what leeway I had and what scope I had to increase and decrease resourcing, or a particular focus on a certain role, or a particular focus on a certain team. But without the modeling, it would be much more iterative. Like, do I think this team's efficient? No, I don't. Okay, I'll add another X amount of headcount. often adding more headcount creates bigger problems. It's not the other way around. And hiring for the sake of hiring, I would avoid militantly, having gone through believing it's about understanding what is moving the dial in your organization and how you manage that resource, rather than we seem to be busy and under-resourced, let me resource it more. And I find that understanding through modeling on an Excel or on a Google Doc, all of the outcomes. And that will be unique to every business and the levers that it has. But I have developed a passion for this that I never thought was in me, because that is not the background I come from at all. But it really helps me understand where we're going and where we need to go and where we've gone off course, the financial modelling and the operational modelling.
That feels like a lot of forecasting work, sort of pre-work, and then you build the model, and then you hire the people, and then you tweak the model based on real life feedback. What processes are most needed once you've hired someone, or even in the hiring process if you're trying to scale those?
Well, I can only talk to the bulk of the team that I hired being freelance and global. So accountability is something you have to look at very differently if you're sitting next to someone to if you're sitting in a whole different continent and you've never met them. And it's finding that balance between kind of being a team player and having the values correctly aligned to the team, but also the output and the quality of work. And for me, there was no, going back to the same theme, there was no amount of data that was too much data. The more data you had, the more decisions could be made and the more insights you could draw from them. For example, for us in a global roster of content producers, quality was, of course, the number one. And quality can be determined by a set of standards that we implemented, because it's independent to each business what real quality looks like. But then quality with no output is very different to quality with target output, and different to quality with excessive output. So great quality with very, very varying output levels that couldn't be relied on doesn't help scale a business. Poor quality with massive output doesn't help scale a business. And I've found countless cases of both of those ends of the spectrum, much more towards poor quality with massive output. So it's not letting the model determine the output. It's actually having to lift up the bonnet and see what's going on in the engine. And so even though your numbers as a whole of productivity in a business could look fine, when you lift up the hood and you look at who's delivering what and how much of it is exactly what I want to see being delivered by a global team that's kind of rostered in and rostered out, you do yourself a favor as a founder by actually understanding the levers below that, what performance looks like, what numbers can hide and conceal, and what facts you could be missing by looking just at the overarching, well, we've met the model or we haven't met the model. And I made some mistakes that way, thinking we were on track for delivery. But when I actually look closer, it would be that a certain amount of people were our kind of A players reliably delivering, and a good number of people were able to mask performance through the A players' output. And so managing it more keenly at a more visceral level either needs to be done by you as a founder if you're outsourcing or, onboarding a huge amount of freelancers, or you need someone you absolutely trust to do it. And again, that level of detail is the thing that enabled us to stop having larger, more consequential issues in the business when it came to quality versus output versus all the other delivery issues you can get when you're working with people all across the world that you haven't met directly.
So then, practically speaking, how do you look under the bonnet? And it's not just a bonnet that's sitting in your driveway, it's the bonnet that's in the Philippines or somewhere. Like, how do you actually...
It's like forensic accounting. How do you find out if there's a fraud in a company, right? You either train yourself on how to forensically look at numbers, or you get someone else to do it. So it depends on the asset that you're creating. So is the asset content? Is the asset e-commerce links? Is the asset, going to do plumbing in different locations? There's all different... What is the product or service, right, that is being delivered? In our case, it was a mixture of content, visual, video, written, and therefore what is the quality standard for all of that content? And then you actually, whether you spot check whether you talk directly to whether you choose to read X amount of pieces or watch X amount of pieces from a certain producer, whether you choose to work with the line managers and look at the profile of their team and look at who's consistently scoring. I think scoring output, again, for products or services is really important. But when I say lifting the bonnet, I mean that one line in a model would be, this is what a team delivers. But another line in a model would be, this is what AJ delivers. Now, the number I learned to realize is 5% of what matters. The number, just because you're on target for a certain thing doesn't mean you're delivering to the right quality, doesn't mean that you're on brand, doesn't mean that you're doing it right. It just means you can hit a number. So what I learned the hard way was that you have to go to that level in our business, but in a plumbing business, it might be going around to inspect the work. It depends what the business is, but you can't rely on a target being met to think that the business is healthy. You have to take a step down that ladder to look at what is being delivered and by whom, and it depends on what the business is. But we had a few clangers in that way where we kind of found out that, 90%, it's the classic rule where 90% of the output is from 10% of the team, right? But when you find out things like that in a given team, you have to over-index on the people who are delivering and find more people like them, rather than saying, well, at least the team does it as a whole, because you're not running an efficient team. It's that kind of thing.
One thing you mentioned within that was, as you say, you can measure the output. You can't measure what the inputs are and whether they're aligned with the business. How are you, and this to me speaks to culture, how are you building a culture across freelancers across the world for 450 people?
Regardless of our team size, I won't lie and say that's not a challenge. That is really, really a challenge. And it's a mixture and when you're not in real life, when you're kind of online, the challenge is magnified, because you're not hiring someone you've sat in the room with and kind of really had the same interaction with when it comes to the cultural sensibilities of a company. I think the main thing that I found is that training and induction are not nice to have. They are absolutely essential. Walking people through, both in the interview process and then at the beginning, before they even get to work on anything, what you stand for, what you believe, why you're here to do it, and why the part they're playing is so important. And we've got it really right at times and we've got it really wrong at times, because sometimes you're just looking for somebody to get the job done. And those things always come back to bite you. If you don't spend the time bedding down people to understand why their role is so important and why it's so important to be that it's good enough, if not great, then you end up paying for it at the other end. So whether or not that's training resources, in any company it's different, but for us it was about much more methodical training, much more training about brand values, brand guidelines, much more training about our style and our tone and why we only talk to parents and families in a certain way. But none of it negates the fact that you'll still find things on a daily basis that don't accord with that. And then it's how you manage it. So every single day now, I'm signing off all of our different parts of our media output, and I might not be signing off the entirety of it, but when I look at it, I'll still have a steer on things, and I will still be trying to educate and discuss with the team my thoughts versus, their consensus and how we want to talk to our audience. And so the team have to be aligned on how we want to speak to the world. And it's not just how they do their job, it's what we output, because we are in the publishing and media space. So we don't just talk internally, we also talk externally.
And how do you instill this sort of like quality assurance within your managers? As you say, like you can manage one way, but you have to build the org chart such that you're only managing a certain number of direct reports, right?
We found, maybe others have different ideas, but a massive amount of checks and balances. And again, through the trusted spreadsheet, but some people would use Notion or some people would use other tools, but effectively all the things that you value and that are the drivers of efficiency or output or quality or whatever you decide is the KPI has to be measured. If it's not measured, then it's not managed. So whether or not it's a number, whether or not it's a rating, it's a 7 or a 10, whether or not it's something in between, you have to manage it, and you have to make a status report or equivalent the thing that is part of managing up. So, if people have a weekly one-to-one, that's part of the agenda. And there isn't a week that goes by where that's not looked at. If you don't look at it, then the person who's meant to be completing it will start having a reticent approach to completing it. And then 2 months later, you haven't got the statistics you need to look at. So it is embedding that in the culture of the business and making sure it gets done. And again, it's easy to say, I've been there where there's been feast and famine in that regard. We are absolutely, not faultless. We've experienced it all, like with and without. And I just think when you've got it, when you align their KPIs, whoever's managing a team, to the KPIs of the team and what you need them to be signing off on, it makes it easier for everyone. I think the hardest thing is operating in a grey area where people are too thinly spread about what they're trying to oversee, and that then it kind of can backfire.
What other things felt like really obvious growing pains as you scaled?
I think it's going back to that. Well, the people point, it's bigger than kind of processes with the people you've got, but it's imagining whole different needs of people types and skill types that you haven't encountered yet, but you quickly kind of run into these crash zones where you kind of, does anyone really know about, newsletter, CMS, the best practice for sending global campaigns out? You just thought WordPress or whatever you were using was good enough until it suddenly stares you in the face urgently that it isn't. So it's understanding your tech stack, but it's also understanding your product stack of all of the things that could help, that you wouldn't have to be building or trying to innovate around yourself as you grow. And I think half the time as a founder, your head is stuck so deeply into the business that you don't look up. It's like a submarine until the peephole comes up. You just don't know what's out in the market, and you realize you've been trying to soldier away at a problem that actually had a solution. And I think the answer for us has come from the networking point we raised earlier in our chat, has actually been very beneficial in understanding what other founders at your stage of growth are using to rely on to aid their business growth and to support things that aren't, if it's not what your business does, then see if someone else does it. And you find that better through talking to other founders than you do through a Google search, because it's so nuanced. But I think there's been a lot of instances where we've thought the solution didn't exist and we've gone down a rabbit hole trying to do a kind of a workaround ourselves. And actually there could have been so many quicker ways to achieve the outcome that we desired, if that makes sense.
But at the same time, you can't sort of forecast these things.
You can't. And trial and error is unfortunately an ongoing and essential part of the process. And if everyone knew the answers from day one, then none of these podcasts or interviews would be relevant because everyone would have it sussed. So yeah.
So then do you have a process as to when you lift your head above water, when you open the submarine door to look around and see if you're heading in the right direction?
I wish I did. I could say after COVID, I felt like I'd been in a padded cell for like 2 years, where I was desperate for the oxygen of other people, other ideas, other perspectives, and other insights. And I felt that I had it online through the group that we're both on and through kind of chatting through email, but I didn't have it enough in real life. So I've over-indexed massively getting back into me and people and life and the oxygen that it brings me. I don't think the pendulum always sits firmly in the middle. And now my aim is to be more out than in, but I was so in my home office, in my spreadsheet, in my padded cell, because actually padded cells are quite nice. It wasn't an unpleasant experience to be going deep in for somebody who's an extrovert like me. It wasn't bad, but it's great when I'm out and I bring it back. And I often feel like I'm a fisherman and I come back to the business with the catch of the day. And sometimes my co-founder's like, great, I'll put it on the barbecue. And sometimes she's like, I'm throwing it in the bin. It doesn't always, the catch of the day doesn't always make it to the table, but I love innovation. I love connection. I love conversation. And I love bringing fresh ideas into the business. And I'm doing more of that now than ever. But when I didn't do it, it paid off, but it wasn't me being my best self.
But you still had to play that role.
Had to. As a founder, you don't get to play just the role that you were made to play. unless you...
Until you get to a certain stage, right? That's usually what, like, again, maybe I'll just
I'm
speak
not
from
there yet.
personal experience, but I've always thought, oh, when the business is big enough and I have enough people that I can employ, then I won't have to do this part of the business which I don't enjoy and I'm crap at.
Yeah, I suppose the honest truth of that comes with the extent to which they are essential, or disposable is the wrong word, but essential or non-essential parts of the business, meaning you might not enjoy signing off the accounts, but if it's not you, let me tell you, that's not an advisable strategy. Like, the buck stops with you, the finance of the business is controlled by you. If you're not cognizant or literate with accounts now, there's a chance to learn, but it's not a delegable thing, ideally, to a certain extent. Payments. I don't like doing payments. I don't like sitting on all of these fintech platforms doing payments. I can't see a point at which that isn't going to be part of my life, because I can't see a point unless you have you're large enough to have a full-time CFO or something like that, where payments wouldn't come into my life as a founder. So yes, I might not have to kind of sit there and do a product roadmap, which isn't my preferred skill set compared to my co-founders, but there are parts and parcels of, there's just the grit of life that you have to do.
Are there any other parts of your job as the CEO that you feel aren't delegable in their entirety?
I don't think you can competently sign away your people responsibilities in terms of hiring at almost any level. If it's at a really junior level and you don't have capacity to kind of meet and engage with people, then I really think you need to have a part in the process of designing how people are kind of assessed for your company. Because I think any one person has the opportunity to be a game changer, positively or negatively. And therefore, the founders should have an involvement in the kind of people coming through the door, regardless of whether you're 400 or 40 or 4 people. I do think that's really important. I think as you go up the seniority curve, 10x that, 100x that, it feels like a painful use of time when you're really thinly spread and you haven't got a free hour to, go to the gym, let alone do another interview. But it pays dividends if you can be more involved in the hiring process than you would always want to be, even if it's not what you see as your area of the business. And I think that has been something I think you can delegate. You can delegate everything at a price. The problem is it's not always a financial price. Sometimes it's a much more cultural price.
And it feels like at the stage that you're at, what you're determining from these interviews is largely about cultural fit. I'm guessing you have people that are doing the quality assurance on whether this person can do the job they're being hired for, and that's sort of decided and ticked off before they get to you. And by the point they get to you, it's just a case of, am I getting a good intuitive feeling that this person is aligned with what we do? Yeah,
but also understanding all of our biases and all of the fact that we often like people like us. That's just human nature. So understanding, actually over-indexing on the bit, which is what is the role, what can they do, putting them in scenarios you've seen in the company, that you as a founder might have looked at differently to somebody in a different role, and actually seeing in real time how they react and what they say they do. Because if it's just, do I like them, I'll end up with 100 people that are like my mates, and that's not what you need in a company. So it's how do they think without any crib sheet and without, hiding behind a screen. How do they think in a situation? And I give them 3 to 5 situations that have happened. There's no right or wrong. It's how they would handle it. And are they a problem solver or not is really, really important, I think.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. Are there anything else that you put into your interviews consistently that you feel are a good signal or a good litmus test?
I do ask quite a bit about kind of we can all rehearse why we like the company and why we want to do it, but kind of drilling down a bit more into someone's personal motivations about where they want to get to in life and what attracted them to this, and understanding there's no right or wrong. If it's a financial driver and you're open to doing the job to the best you can, or if it's like you're absolutely passionate about changing lives of families forever, I value honesty and I value directness, but I do like to know the intrinsic motivation behind why people do what they do, mainly because that's what interests me. And I do want to know if the people I'm working with are aligned or have a different perspective. And I want to understand them as well as their skills.
Is there an interview that stands out for you? Someone you remember having a really strong intrinsic driver?
I mean, everybody that I've had a direct relationship in the hiring has either made me just think, I suppose, again, it's like the kind of analogy to getting married with the co-founder, but also kind of bringing someone into your family. It's just a sense that we'd be better with them than without them, because they add something that we don't have in the midst of the company, and that they would challenge us and make us think in a different way, but also broaden the skill set around the table. So they wouldn't be an automaton that just was a copycat of one of the personalities or experiences we have around the table. They make us better, not worse. And because we're both women, I think we look at women and hiring women completely differently to other demographics, in terms of no amount of personal baggage that a woman might carry would put us off hiring a woman or a man with a similar amount of baggage, meaning we would never look narrowly at somebody's domestic setup and say, well, they can or they can't. We always believe they can. And we very much a supporter of anybody who wants to be out and working and doing and building businesses. We don't, I think that's been in our favor, Sophie and I, having that outlook, which is, well, we're two women that say we can. So anyone else that believes that they can too, this is a good place for them.
Because you started Kidadl when you had young kids, right?
Boy, I didn't even have my third.
Didn't have your third. So,
No.
But you still had 2 kids.
I had twins, yeah. When I met my co-founder and she presented to me kind of the early ideas that she'd had in this space, my twins were literally 2.5 years old, climbing the walls. It was domestic chaos, and I was just desperate to find things to do that fulfilled their interests and fulfilled up the blocks of time that I had to get out of the house, get away from the washing machine, get away from the chaos, and just get out into the world. And so I was feeling the exact pain point at that point in time. Yeah, that the business was built to solve. So I went into it because of the pain I felt, not knowing a lot about the other joys along the way of the startup journey. I knew the pain. I absolutely knew the pain.
Do you feel like you're a uniquely suited parent to juggle all of those responsibilities, or do you think that's something that every parent has to learn?
I think I am lucky in the sense of I am a good enough person rather than a perfect person when it comes to my standards to just go forward. So I'm lucky in that my mindset allows me to push on through with suboptimum circumstances for the majority of the time without it crushing me. Meaning I know vaguely the balls that are china and the balls that are plastic and the balls that will bounce, and I'm confident enough to just continue forward even when that's a bit hairy. I think if you're a parent who wants everything phenomenally fabulous in every bucket, there's only so many buckets you can physically carry, because it's impossible to have the perfect home, the perfect children, the perfect clothes, the perfect, cookery, the perfect job. You have to let some things lie. So you either have buckets that are kind of half to 3/4 full, or you just keep moving the water between the buckets. But if you want buckets or parts of your life that are perfect and immaculate, like any person doing anything in life, you're going to over-index on those, and you're not going to have the scope to be able to be a multi-hyphenate, which basically being a founder and a mum of 3 kids or any kids is probably needing. So yes, I do think it depends on mindset and outlook. No, I don't think everyone has the same perspective, but it depends how highly they value different parts of that and how much focus they want to put on those different aspects. But no, I do not believe you can have it all in equal measure. No.
Of course not. Sounds like a keeping up with the Joneses type way of thinking in a way.
It comes from both your background and how you've been parented and what you've been brought up to expect, but also how much you can live in the bit of rough and ready. And I can. Some can't. There's no right or wrong. I can live with things being suboptimum, but still somewhere on the line of optimum. Other people want things to be more optimum or just discount them from their lives. And again, I have many friends like that. I have many people that I work with like that. It's just who you are. I don't think it's great to fight against your nature your whole life, but I don't think that necessarily would make it easy to be a founder of a business from inception to sort of scale with young kids, because things fall apart and you have to rebuild as you go.
That sounds similar to most early stage startups anyway, almost companies, right?
Yes.
Nothing, no part of the business is ever going to be perfect. It's just what needs to be good enough to get you to the next stage.
Exactly.
Speaking of kids and keeping all the plates spinning, I had a lovely chat with your husband this morning who just glows and gushes about you, of which he said she's incredibly loyal, there's no one better to have on your team, an amazing mother, especially as life is really hectic at the moment. She's the hardest working. She wants to get shit done. She's a real doer. Even if sometimes you feel like she's not achieving, she's striving to be the best. And she wants everyone else around her to reach their full potential. And having someone like that in your life is infectious. He said he's more inclined to laziness and cutting corners, whereas she stops me from falling into some of my bad habits and she helps me achieve my goals. She's like the best team member.
Wow. This should be done more often. You could be a marital therapist as well as an interviewer, AJ.
This is all the little sprinkles of joy I like to add into these interviews. So I think that really echoes and adds to your point of you have to work on the important things. And it sounds like you've worked hard on being a really hands-on and like present partner as well as mother. I just am a hard worker, meaning I kind of, it is true what Danny said that about me. I don't take the shortcut. I sometimes wish I did, but I will see things through, and I do want the best for all the family and for him and for our whole unit, and I will push and push. Sometimes feels like I push against concrete, but I do push and push for the boys and him to kind of achieve their potential, but also for us to get shit done, because family life is full of demand, and to have the fun, you have to get through the demand, to be able to enjoy that. There's always a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, be it an amazing day out, be it a great memory, be it a wonderful trip, be it a lovely dinner together, but that it comes at a cost of your time or your effort or your focus or your screaming and shouting. There's always a cost to get to that point. But I can live in the point at the pot of the gold at the end of the rainbow, which gets me through the crap. Whereas other people kind of give up when they kind of start soldiering on. I know I'm going to get there, and I have faith I'm going to get there. But my God, sometimes it's like pushing concrete up a hill. Yes. That sounds like, if we were to zoom out a little bit, it's almost a method for building resilience in a way.
Yes.
Which sounds like it's visualizing what the future could be like, and then bringing that excitement back into the present.
Yes, but I don't do it as a methodology. It's kind of how I'm wired. So yes, it's not a conscious methodology. Ever since I was a child, I've always been somebody who would push on through, and the pushing on through is kind of natural to me. The outcomes are variable. Some of them are good. Some of them are less good. Some of them are disappointing. Some of them are wonderful. But pushing on through, which has actually helped me as a founder, is something that it has not been something I've had to learn. It's just been something about what I've always been like. Founderdom has made it 10x, 100x, 1000x more, but I don't think being a founder is a good time to learn resilience. I think you need to ideally find a way to learn resilience before you go on the founding journey, because otherwise you won't be a founder for very long. That's just the simple truth, because it's the most resilient requiring journey ever.
So then looking back, where do you feel you learnt your resilience?
I suppose a million things. Like we all go on our journeys. I was involved in a national youth group from the age of about 11, where we used to go camping, al fresco, kind of 2 to 4 weeks a year. You know, we do everything from putting up our own tents to running our own itineraries to kind of, it wasn't quite Lord of the Flies, but you know, where we would be making things happen. If we didn't make them happen, they wouldn't happen. So a lot of imagination and a lot of cold, damp, boggy mornings, and a lot of fun in between. I think that you know, being in that kind of girl guiding, I suppose, mentality from a young age, and doing these things in the summer that weren't about luxury and weren't about leisure, and actually would be probably 4 to 5 times a year, was very character building. I went to school from age 11, an hour and a quarter from my house, and had to travel there and back every day, either on my own or with 1 or 2 friends. So I was in central London every day from a young age, navigating an adult world as a child. But again, everyone will have a similar or their own version of that experience. I, you know, had a number of blended experiences in my family where we kind of had to get through some tough times as a family unit. And I've seen, you know, and I saw my parents grow stronger together as a result of it, but it was by no means always a walk in the park. So I've kind of seen how a family iterates through different things that get thrown at them. And I think everyone can pick from their life experiences things that they haven't chosen to experience. You know, the summer camps and all the kind of camping and all of that, I did choose to, but things that happen to you as a family or in your friendships or in your education, you often just have to endure. But the only solution in life is to endure them, meaning the other solution is giving up. So we all find our resilience in a way, and then you can choose whether your dialogue about it becomes as a victim of it or as somebody that's overcome it. But enduring it is broadly not a would you fancy enduring this today, AJ? You have to go through things, and as a founder, that goes from the kind of average of maybe 3 to 5 times a year to 3 to 5 times a day. So the level of resilience required is higher because the level of things to endure and process and manage and find ways through is more. But it's not a new emotion or new feeling that you haven't had in life. Everyone will recognize it. It just depends how much of the kind of person you are that wants to take it on the chin obsessively, intensely, rather than somebody that wants to say, I'd rather not live like this. I'd rather take my paycheck at the end of the month. Thank you very much. Because life's going to throw things at me anyway. Founders go, well, life's going to throw things at me anyway, and I'm going to throw them at myself as well. We're a unique kind of person.
So it sounds like there's a scale. We've got giving up and letting go on one end of the scale. We've got enduring challenges somewhere here. But I also feel like there's the other end of the scale, which is almost even enjoying the tough times or finding a way to find joy and love the tough times. But that feels to me like it's almost a bit too idealistic.
I think it depends on how you're wired, but I am best when I'm thinly spread. I'm not best when I have the luxurious overspilling of time. And that's when I go into existential, what's it all about? Why are we here? You know, the areas of life I would rather not focus on day to day only come up for me when there's a void. So when I'm in motion, doing, creating, making, it's just so much more fulfilling than when I'm sedentary and contemplative, because it doesn't really lead to kind of the better version of me. It leads to a kind of, oh, okay. Is it all as positive as I think? Whereas I'm really happy in a dynamic positivity. That's my preferred state. So I kind of think don't always knock it when you're a busy person. Keeping busy is much for you as the things you're busy with.
That's actually so much more helpful than you realise. I think I'm very, very similar to you in that sense. Like having just had a lot of idle time, it was not fulfilling at all. And I love it when there's back-to-back meetings, there's back-to-back stuff that needs to happen, need to get stuff finished before a deadline. Like I love that and thrive in it.
Yeah, and actually knowing that about yourself is a real key to unlocking fulfillment and happiness with whatever you choose to do. And I think sometimes we're also keen to be like someone else, or like the zeitgeist of the moment, or like something we see on social media. But actually, you'll get your ultimate fulfillment by being the truest version of yourself and saying, it might sound strange to you, but this works for me. And, like at the moment, I've ended up volunteering to run the school leavers camping trip for 60 families. And last year I ran the silent auction for the school. And people who don't know me kind of say, that's really mad. And people that know me kind of go, oh yeah. Because they know that for me, that leads to a strange kind of fulfillment. And if I'm going to give back to a school or a charity or wherever, I want to spend my time giving back, I'd rather do it in a way that I think is useful to what I can contribute. So I like the idea that my giving back is linked to actually getting stuff done. And I know that about myself, and the people that are close to me know that about me as well. So it's only the people that are kind of a step away that say, you're obviously a glutton for punishment, and they'd be right as well, but different.
I feel like this, getting back to our authenticity piece, is one of those superpowers which comes in with working hard, being resilient, and understanding how to stay authentic. Works both in home life and in work life, and these are all sort of mental models which apply across the board. Are there any others that you think have a big impact at home and at work as a founder?
The glaring thing that is so many more times important than I ever knew or realized was being organized, and organized to within an inch of yourself, which links back to all my obsessiveness about sheets and tabbing and whatever I do. But 3 kids in 3 different classes, and I'm lucky enough that it's one school, right? But my sister, it's 3 kids, 3 different classes, 3 schools, right? As well as a day job, whatever level of day job, where you have to be somewhere and do something, or whether you're running something, doesn't really matter. As well as a family, as well as a pet in my case, as well as a home, as well as forgetting going anywhere on holiday, but let alone going at the weekend, let alone the birthday parties, which each child would on average be invited to 20 a year. So you've got 60 birthday presents a year, as well as family birthdays, holidays, religious holidays, you name it. The organizational pressure on at least one member of the household, often the woman, wrongly so, got a whole conversation I'd love to have about that, but the organizational pressure of that, aside from any other commitments, and you will have a similar amount as a founder, if not more, coming from within the business, is one of the hardest things I have ever and continue to be faced with, because it's no amount of ticking a box says that's done and that's off my plate. So it's basically it's like washing dishes, but every day they come. And it's understanding that it's part of your life forevermore until at least your business is no longer yours or your children are no longer living at home. So it's combining the resilience of being able to handle this low level prong that goes in all the time of all the things you have to do, with the fact that you have to be organized to be able to be on top of them, or you have some very rude awakenings as you go down the line, which I've had. Like, Mrs. Feldman, there's nobody here at school today. Your son's in the waiting room. Meaning it might not happen to me more than once every couple of years, but it's definitely happened. There was a story when David Cameron drove off and one of the kids was still at the pub. It's overwhelming, and it's comedically so. So organization would be the other thing I'd add to that, or being able to teach yourself to be more organized. If, like me, it's not your first. Resilience and organization are very different things. They link, but they're not the same. So having systems and processes, for example, I have a calendar, and every single thing within spitting distance of family life, I invite my husband to, and I invite myself to, and I have reminders come up. And whether it goes as granular as who's having a play date with who every single given day. Because if I haven't got it somewhere registered, it's like it doesn't exist. And so it's that level, and it's really frustrating, very dull, often not talked about. and often the only thing that keeps households on track or falling apart, depending on where you are in that pendulum. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's an enjoyable part of life.
I mean, it's exactly the same. I invite Lara to all of the events, which are anything to do with her, just to make sure that she's in the loop. Everything goes in my calendar, like super organized.
Yeah, it's the only way, especially with two people, let alone when you have
5.
children. Yeah.
With that organization, you obviously need strong communication. And that applies in business as well as home life. Thinking about home life, as you said, lots of jobs have in the past and still today fall to the woman of the household. I'm guessing you have a more balanced division of things that you have to do at home. How do you and Danny approach managing family life and your role in the team?
Yeah, see, I would call myself the team coach. I wouldn't call myself the team player. Danny might disagree. So I would say that I'm the person that's like on the sidelines constantly, where you have to be, where the fixture is, what you're doing, what you need to wear. I would say that my dream is that I evolve into being a team player where the team functions and I'm one of the positions in the team. At the moment, I'm the team, everything else. And then I set the team up to be able to play. So we had differing views, I'd say, in terms of whether it's balanced and equal. I'd say Danny would say I'm doing everything I can, whereas I would say, well, then we need a wife. There's just it's too much. I feel the way too much on my shoulders in terms of managing the mental domestic load. But he is an active participant in helping with the family, with the children, with the home. It's just the inordinate amount of stuff to do. And I have been unlucky in one regard, lucky in others, to be primarily work from home since the pandemic. And he works in his office with, a unique amount of distance between the home and the office. So he has a very different segregation in terms of time and focus. And I think for anyone, man or woman, working from home has huge perks and huge letdowns. And the letdowns often are the domestic things that creep in. And so therefore, I'm trying to optimize more for being away from the home, going into the co-working days we've organized, going in and seeing people for meetings, going anywhere where other things that I know I need to do press into my working day, because I don't think it's healthy. And I would like that not to be the case as much.
Also can relate. Obviously, I don't have the kids, but I have been working at home for the past 5 years, and just house chores and admin just interrupt.
Wherever you look,
all the time.
Yeah.
We're coming into the end. This has been so rich, and I have a whole list of questions and things I want to ask you more about, like the division of labour between men and women, and the issues that women have with fundraising and networking and communities and building culture. But we'll have to save that for part 2 at some point. Before we go, I'd love to know, what is a characteristic of yours that you're most proud of?
I would say my innately positive nature, which has taken me through a lot of very dark times, and my belief that the glass is always half full, not half empty. And that is the mindset I go into the day with. I haven't had to train myself. I haven't learned it. I just have a huge appreciation for being alive, for having what I have, for being a mother to my children and being married to my husband, and being able to live out my dreams of building a company, even with all the ups and downs, and being able to live a life in a city that I love and go about my business. I feel very, very lucky, but I also feel like because I can go outside the front door and look around and go, wow, spring has sprung, and isn't this amazing? And I'm not making myself say it as a mantra, I'm really feeling it. It brings a bit of gratitude into the day, which can help frame some of the really murky, difficult points of the day. Everyone has them in their day. So I am lucky to have a positive, more upbeat outlook innately. I haven't had to work at it. It's like when, other people have other features and you say, wow, you're so lucky to have whatever. And they say, well, I was born that way. I'm a positive person, and it isn't for show. I am genuinely a believer that things are good and they can even get better, even when they don't.
Well, I think everyone around you feels that. And I think I will take this opportunity just to thank you so much for everything you've done with Kidadl over the past now 9.5 years since the idea was born.
Yes.
You've impacted millions of families, and that's sort of a nice big scale number, but then actually narrow it down to myself. The conversation that we had at Forest has drastically changed the course of my life. So Hannah asked me, Hannah and I, on the last night of the last retreat that I was running, Hannah asked me, what's going on with you and your girlfriend?
Yes.
And I said, oh, we're like having the best time, marriage, kids at some point. And do you remember exactly what you said?
Well, you probably remember it better because it's been a jolly evening, shall we say.
You basically said, what the fuck are you waiting for? And it was this crazy light bulb moment. And then we talked through this notion of when one should get engaged and married. And that conversation has continued through to just before this interview. So you made a huge impact. So thank you so much. And
I just spent a lot of time in life seeing people waiting for a moment that then passed them by. That's why I think I shared that with you, because I've seen people that kind of have that feeling and then they go on and clean the house and life continues and they don't bottle it up and make anything happen. And then life gets in the way. So I kind of think if I had my time again and I knew more people at your stage of the journey, that is what I would encourage them to do.
Well, you and I are both doers and both people who like to get shit done.
Yeah.
So there'll be much more waiting around from my behalf. But yeah, it's honestly, I tell this story to lots of people. And so I just want to reiterate the fact that you make a massive impact on lots of people's lives, including my own. So thank you.
Thank you. And it's a lovely way to end the conversation and something I don't really think about enough or ever. So I appreciate that.
That's okay. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to remind you.